Hey, what's up everybody? Rob Marzullo here from Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So in today's video, I thought we could try something a little bit different. I don't know about different, but just another approach at trying to show you how to shade. But I want to show how to shade a face. So, this is another important exercise. And I'm going to skip a lot of the other stuff like how to draw the face. I've obviously got videos for that. Tons and tons of free videos at this point. I think we're up over like 500 videos on the channel. It's just insane. But yeah, check out, the search bar on the main screen and type in, how to draw faces, Andrew Loomis method. Any of those should bring a multitude of things up. And you see I'm skipping some of the traditional steps, but it's something you kind of do as you get a little bit more confident with your drawing process. So I'm just going to kind of throw this in and get the broad strokes in place for a face. And then I want to talk about shading the face. So what I'm doing now is just kind of getting this frown looking face. I'll get a nose shape in there. Something we can add some shadows off of. And, kind of figure out the brow position. Get the immediate expression in there. Something like that. So kind of a grimace. Kind of a none too happy individual. So I think it'll add to the mood when we add the shadows. So what I want to do is first establish any kind of plane changes. So, obviously when we got the in-depth area of the eye sockets, the recessed area, then obviously we're going to catch more shadows in there. We got to think about, where the cheeks are in this particular type of character. Do they have very pronounced cheekbones, things like that. All of that kind of matters when you start to drop in those shadows. So, things like the bottom lip, where does that rest? If they're making this sort of grimace, maybe they get, that little pocket of skin. It's always there, but then it becomes more evident with a certain facial expression. And, the plane change of the nose. And what I want to do is first get this in here like this, and then talk to you about kind of establishing some base shapes or shadows to work from. So let's go ahead and move this up a little bit. There's our little character dude. Again, not a very happy type. Something's definitely got this guy peeved. He's pretty mad. And then, we can keep embellishing upon that. We could, keep in mind the eyes are windows to the soul, right? So we could do like a very, tiny little pupil and make the iris have white to one side of it, above or below. And it's generally going to be a more, intense expression. So we could play around with that as well. But this is going to be more or less on the shadows. So once we've got this base information, we kind of have this idea of what the character, is about to look like. There's still a lot of things that are subject to change. But we want to think about how this light might be hitting. So what I would like to do with you guys is actually show you a couple examples. This will just be one particular example. That way we can really delve into it in real time. But I'll introduce other examples as we progress in different face shapes and all that. So there's so many variables. I think they all require a little bit of attention. But one of the things that I like to do here is actually kind of emulate some sort of quick representation of the shadow. So what I mean by that is to take a little bit lighter tone. We'll just say like a light gray here. And I'm actually working off a different layer. But what I want to do here is just do a bit of a gray wash. I guess it needs to be a little bit darker than that. And so what I like to do here is just kind of quickly with a larger brush, almost like I'm working with a marker, and establish some of these plane changes because it helps me to visualize what I want to see with the shadows. So I'm picturing that the light source is off to the one side. So if I draw like, it's always good to do like this dimensional kind of effect. So you can kind of envision a little bit more clearly where the light's coming from. So if I draw it like this 3D object, you can tell by seeing this plane change of this object that it's in front of the face pointing back towards the character at an angle. Versus if I just go like this, you can't really tell where that's coming from. So something like that. And then now what I want to do is picture areas that might be totally in shadow like the recess of the brow here. And, we might make this character look a bit more intense by giving him the, the defined baggy eyes kind of thing. It'll either make the character look older and or a little bit more stressed and angry, I guess. But the other thing is to bring this over. And so let's say that this whole side of the face here is in shadow. So let's do that first. So kind of the broad strokes first. And then let's bring this shadow over and around. And let's say that, portion of the chin gets blocked like this. Let's figure out where the drop shadow of the nose is going to be, the lower plane change of the nose. So you see, this is just kind of a quick and down and dirty way to hurry up and get this in there and establish some of this. You might want to leave like a little bit of light right there on the side of the mouth. Get the underneath of the lip here. Something like that. Top lip's probably going to be in shadow because we got to remember the plane change. The top lip comes out, bottom lip comes out, catches the light, bottom of the lip gets shaded. Kind of does like that right there. Kind of sort of drop shadow from the nose, So it's like a, back and forth. Okay, so, you might get some shadow from the edge of the lip there, that little indent that we have, some of us. And so on and so forth. So right here, you might get some of that side of the cheek. So it's like it's rounding over this way, and you get a bit of a drop shadow and pocket right there. And you might get some of the shadow from the one side of the brow. So as you start to detail some of this, and as you get further into the details, you start to add all the little, kind of hook lines, and you embellish it or refine it, I guess. But for now, again, we're working on the broad strokes. Another tricky part is kind of this area right here, because I don't think we're going to add hair to this character. But what happens is, as you shade this, it's not just a circle here, and it's not always even just as simple as a circle and two ovals. So what happens is it's finding that nice little bit of detail where it looks like there's some skin up here, that it's not just entirely smooth. But it's real easy to overdo, and it's real easy to get wrong. So we'll just start simplistically here. You're going to get the top of the ear. You're going to get a drop shadow. This ear is all going to be in shadow because we've got to remember the head is a lot larger than the ear. So obviously it's just going to cover that entirely. Same thing, you're going to get this large drop shadow from the head. And then you're probably going to get a little bit of shadow from this side of the sternocleidomastoid thingy majig. And, so you see it starts to kind of come together. And then you can kind of keep chipping away at these shadows and adding a little bit more here and there. Refining them a bit more. We could get into the detail, like if we start thinking about, the age of this character, we might start adding more wrinkles. You also still have a bit of a plane change here. So I don't know if you want to define it entirely with a shadow right here, but it still needs to be in there in some way. So maybe some, light shading lines, something. Remember that the nose isn't smooth. Very often it's not anyways. So you're going to get like the bulbous part of the nose, maybe a little bit of flat area, and then maybe another ridge or, bend to the top portion. All depends on the character, obviously. So just like that, we've got some shadow to work with. And, it took a little bit longer because I was explaining it, but this is like my method for working through shadow. And then a lot of times I'll turn it to like, a blue line or something, but I kind of like it as a gray this time, but maybe just a little bit less opacity because I want to draw over top of that, because what I'm basically emulating is more of a comic style that I want to do. So let me get back to black here. Oops, or I thought I did. Try that again. And for those of you that are wondering, I am using Manga Studio, Clip Studio Paint to do this, but any application will work. I didn't want this particular lesson to be application specific. So now what I'm going to do is get in here, and I'm going to start to chisel this out a bit more. So I'm going to start to, kind of really think a little bit more about style and detail of what I want to see here. But again, I might leave like little areas and pockets of light off to one side of parts of the head. Definitely I like it right here on the cheek. I think you see that a lot in this type of illustration. It mainly helps you to realize that even though this is in shadow, maybe some areas of this are just a little bit protruded up or out and still catching a little bit of light, because that's really how the face works. The subtleties in which it catches light is everything. And what's funny about this is as you do these types of studies enough, you'll start to pick up on things that are actually, common, or not common, I guess, repetitive. So even though the faces are so complex and so wildly different, there actually are similarities in the way that light will catch the face, and you'll get, kind of these ideas where you'll go, oh, every time the light's kind of off to this one side, you get a little bit of light to this under portion of the brow. It's not completely in shadow. This side would be. So once you start to pick up these little repetitive details, it becomes a lot easier to draw this from memory and kind of embellish and stylize and whatever. So I'm just going to kind of change this line a bit. You see I'm being kind of crude with it. I just want it to have a little bit of an organic vibe to it. So I'm trying not to just make it entirely clean. That's another thing I try to see with the shadows, that not every shape is entirely smooth and clean. And then by the time we render it with some line work, we can, change it even a bit more. So we'll get some shadow in the ear here. And we'll just leave this guy bald. Makes it easier for now. Like right here's another good example. We could have just a little bit of light right there, or we could even leave that opening of light and then fill it in with some line work. So maybe we'll try something like that. And I'm going to sketch over this and start to fill this in a bit. Same thing, you could leave just a little bit of light on the very edge of the nostril. Now, if the light was up over a bit more, maybe to about here, or maybe here even, then I think you'd get a little bit of light on the side of the nostril. But I think from the angle it's at, now we got to remember too, not just the angle, but also the intensity or type of light. I'm picturing this being almost like a bit more of a spotlight. So with the intensity, it's going to darken the areas of the face, and you're not going to catch all these little details. So you have to omit some of that. But you can always go back and use a little bit of whiteout or translucent line work and kind of erase back some of these elements if you feel that, it all starts to bleed together and you're not getting the detail or the vibe that you want on the character. But I think this will have a little bit more of an intense kind of dramatic vibe and feel to the work. You guys are probably like, quit saying vibe already. Use some other words there. You've said vibe like 10 times. Do you drive a vibe? No, I do not. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I latch onto a word and it's like, just kind of keep saying it. So anyways, get back to the art, Rob. Come on. You're deviating usually. Yeah, so this is just kind of filler. So forgive me this part. I probably could have time-lapsed, but try not to time-lapse as much because you guys have been telling me like, dude, quit it. We want to see it all in real time. So guess what? That's what we're doing here. The long, drawn-out real time, baby. So just like that. And then once we get this filled in, I'll do a little bit of cross-hatching. And I feel like I needed to do this because if I don't put enough of this in, the cross-hatching just doesn't read well. Like it doesn't read as well off that kind of gray wash. Now, if we're doing a painting, we'd work right off that gray wash and keep, filling that in and then drop some color over top. Or I like to just color and add my shadows. But however you want to do it, there's lots of ways to get her done. And I think the tricky part too is like getting used to filling this all in and not leaving certain lines. Like for instance, it's real tempting to leave a bit of edge lighting on the jawline. And again, you can do that sometimes. Sometimes it'll kind of make sense in the shot and maybe make the art look cool or whatever. But if you pay attention to your photos and your reference and things like that, you'll notice that shadows, bleed together. It's very rare that there's a line or edge light of something. It just depends on how many light sources are in the scene. But if there's one light source like what we have here, then a lot of this, it'll just be one large shadow. Which is probably why I should have just took ink and filled this in, right? But we'll get there. So now let's say that this is about where we want to be. You know, we start to refine some of the edges. I kind of like the shadow right here off the brow. Again, some of it's got to be a little bit random, so it doesn't look too awfully, I don't know, mechanically designed or, you know, not well thought out, I guess. But let's say that this is what we're after. Let's get rid of this crazy line down the middle of the face. And let's get into some rendering. Just a little bit anyways. So you see we've been able to establish this. Now the presence of the face, it kind of occupies space. At least I think it does. I guess if you don't think it does, that's a totally different story, but I think it does. So it looks like it occupies space. It has some dimensionality, if you will. So, but now, you know, shadows don't just abruptly end. Like there's not lines all over the face, right? So this can be a stylized approach. You can let the colorists fill in the work if you're doing comics, but you can also get in here and do some nice little cross hatching, some shade work, and say, well, I kind of picture that, you know, from here to here, this spot to this spot around, there's a gradient. Okay, there's a soft shadow occurring. So to do that, obviously, you know, you start rendering and applying your line work. The way I like to do it a lot of times is just thick to thin lines and have them go that distance, that, you know, that amount of space that I'm looking to apply a gradient to. So something like this. And, you know, you have to decide, like, do you want to cross hatch? Do you want to stipple shade? Do you want to just use a series of straight lines like this? It's all subjective to whatever you're trying to accomplish. I like to vary it up a bit. So I might do a little bit of, you know, cross hatching like this, and then I might leave that alone. Like I don't like to overdo certain areas, and then in other areas I might just do the thick to thin lines, but bring them very tight together. So I saw somebody, I can't remember the artist, they were mentioning like a lot of times new artists make the mistake, new comic artists make the mistake of not bringing their lines tight enough together. And then I started to pay attention to my own work, and I realized I was kind of doing that. And I thought that was a really good tip. So I guess I'll just share that. I wish I could remember the artist that I picked that up from, but just try different variations where these lines are tighter and further apart, but mainly tighter together helps to convey that transition, that shading that you're looking for. That's actually why cross-hatching kind of usually makes it look a little better, not always, because you're basically tightening it up, but with a cross-hatch type method. But you can actually accomplish a lot with just lines tightly together, but really pay attention to that negative space that you're creating as you introduce each new line. If that makes any sense, I hope it does. And then again, just vary it up. So you might do some lines that come this way and then bring some this way. And notice these ones I'm not feathering, I'm just crisscrossing. So I'm purposely doing that as I go through the piece. I'm trying to just vary it up, basically. That way it doesn't all blend together. It doesn't all look so static or so overly repetitive, and again, kind of a mechanical kind of feel to it, because I think that we have this habit of saying, well, this thing that I do works, so I'm going to do it all the time, and then we apply it too much, and a good thing becomes a bad thing. You know, just like pizza. It's obviously a great thing, but you can't eat it all the time or you won't have a neck. So just be aware of that. But yeah, so more lines like this right here. For instance, let me show you this. Like I might shade this just like I did this jaw piece over here, or, you know, area right there, if you can see that. But instead of doing it identically, I might just say, well, let's do the same thing, but space these lines out just a little bit more. And just in that small regard, I'm kind of made the distinction that it's a little bit different. It's not a huge difference. It's not even noticeable really, but it's a difference. And I think that adds up as you shade out the piece. At least that's the way I tend to think about it as I do it. So So again, like say this chin piece, let's say that we want the shadow to, or gradation I should say, to come from here around like this and like this. Now you could actually draw that line in, but I'm just showing you that line to give you an interpretation of what I'm planning to do. So now I have to go back and draw that in. I'll just do the feathered lines or tapered lines. And I'm trying to curve them just ever so slightly. So that's another thing I think that looks a little bit better on organic or anatomy, is to not keep the lines entirely straight, to go around with the curvature of the form. And I do remember the artist I picked that up from. That's from good old David Finch. So remember, you can look at his stuff and pick up his stuff from like Gnome Workshop. I think he's still got stuff over there. And that dude is like the shade master. So, but yeah, he said that, like, you know, actually perceive the line going around the form as you're shading it. And that does work. It helps to give it more depth, more space, occupy more space on the page. So now as I cross hatch it, same thing. I'll just try to tighten it up a bit. Something like that. Maybe skip some, come over here. Go up the chin area like that, you know, just play around with it. You know, experiment. Obviously, the more you experiment, the more you'll figure out your style. And the other thing is to really make sure that the lines are just different, you know, thicknesses overall. So, you know, some parallel, some horizontal, just mix it up. Just have fun with it. Okay, and then, you know, you can even have some that are just floating. They don't need to be attached to a shadow. So, for instance, I just kind of thought more about this skin that you get right here, that kind of round over, and I could establish that or hint to that with just some lines, and they don't need to be connected to a shadow. In fact, as I progressed through this, I would do a lot more of that in areas like this. So again, if I'm trying to make it look like he's got a bit more of this stressed look and more skin kind of, you know, puckering up as he makes this expression, I can establish that or draw that with just a few more lines like that. And this can be helpful too, to make the face and, you know, parts of muscle, everything really, this works on everything, to look more organic. So you can kind of, you know, draw those lines kind of wherever you need to. Some across the nose here. You see I'm making these very thin, very light by comparison to, say, the lines on the chin here. And I might soften up these lines over here. And that's really what any of this is anyways. You're just kind of softening the transition. So again, a little bit of a gradation, and some of it's just style. Some of it's like, I just want this to look cool. What can I do to make it look more interesting? And then also, like, what can I do to make it look like my work? Like, I think that when you do a lot of this and you get really used to it, you're basically signing your work. Like, you're putting another form of a signature onto your work by the way that you render. I know that when I look at artists that I admire, you know, people like you know, McFarlane, David Finch, Jim Lee, any of those guys, Dale Keown, I can tell immediately by the rendering who it is. And even past that, I can tell, you know, just by the shapes he used and everything, really. But definitely in the rendering style. I can also tell if their work's inked by somebody else, because sometimes the rendering will change based upon the inker a little bit. So it's kind of neat how all that works. So we've established a lot. We've got like, you know, some shadows in place. We've got a little bit of rendering. We could obviously keep going. In fact, I would keep adding like little bits of, you know, different line variation to kind of try to make certain areas come off from the page. So, you know, you got to remember, as you do this, you're really trying to propel certain areas off the page and make other areas look recessed or receding back onto the page. And then also you want areas that are like a lot more intense, I think. So like for instance, I'm going to draw some pretty heavy lines down here. You know, some cross hatching, whatever. But what I'm trying to do really is make these darker. So I might even come back, hit these a few times, so that again it looks like the area below the head is even more in shadow and has this larger, you know, gradient, if you will. So because then what that helps to do is direct attention to the face. Likewise, if you start doing stuff like this, you know, you put some different textures and line work in the background. You know, remember, you can be messy at times. It doesn't need to all be straight pretty lines. Again, it's that variation that you create by doing stuff like this. And this wouldn't be my finished pencils, but I would at least take this to inks for sure. I've been doing that more and more lately because you get a certain expressiveness when you jump from something like a sketch like this and you go right to inks. But I might shade this down, keep going back and forth till I get something darker back here, but maybe just keep, you know, the silhouette of the head, but, you know, keep darkening it down until that's less noticeable. And then I might come over here and just do something lighter. So again, all that kind of helps to you know, push them off the page. And you see, this isn't a very pretty drawing. I wasn't going for a very refined sketch. I just want to explain the basic principles. And, you know, you guys let me know if you like this type of video, if you found it to be helpful. And if you do, we'll make more. And if you find it to be lacking, let me know that as well, because I constantly want to improve the quality of this content for you. But yeah, just thought this would be a fun video. And, you know, remember when you're shading like this to just do a lot of variations of this. So we'll approach it from different angles, light sources and things like that, intensity of light, dual light sources. But the main thing is to log a lot of these and not get caught up in trying to make a perfect rendition where you spend all day on it. Just make sure to do your studies. And through this process, you'll learn, get better, and become more confident with your art. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think. As always, more content on the way, so please subscribe. Keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.